All the paths I had been following, all the steps I had taken, were leading back to a single point, namely to the midpoint. It became increasingly plain to me that the mandala is the center. It is the exponent of all paths. It is the path to the center, to individuation. I know that in finding the mandala as an expression of the self, I had attained what was for me the ultimate. Perhaps someone else knows more, but not I. From C.G. Jung's Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Heart of Jesus, King and center of all hearts. From the Litany of the Sacred Heart. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Revelation 12. Under the combined influence of men's thoughts and aspirations, the universe around us is seen to be knit together and convulsed by a vast movement of convergence. Not only theoretically, but experientially, our modern cosmogony is taking the form of a cosmogenesis, at the term of which we can distinguish a supreme focus of personalizing personality. Just suppose that we identify, at least in his natural aspect, the cosmic Christ of faith with the omega point of science. Then everything in our outlook is clarified and broadened and falls into harmony. From Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's Christianity and Evolution. So here we are, friends. Letter 19, The Sun, from Valentin Tomberg's Meditations on the Tarot. And what a letter it is. You know, especially after the opaqueness and challenge of letter 18 to come into the full light of the sun here, and of course into the heart of Tomberg's Sophiology as well. I mean, all of his cards are on the table here. Now he starts off, pardon me, with talking about the principle of cooperation in juxtaposition to the struggle for existence, which gets so emphasized not only in a scientific world and in education, the struggle for existence, you know, but even in our economic spheres, right? Survival of the fittest. Everybody's got to be an entrepreneur or else starve. But he points out that people miss the idea of the principle of cooperation. Right? And he explains on 529, indeed, is it the struggle for existence within an organism, let us say the human body, which explains the effect of the activities of millions of biological units, cells in the organism, or rather, is it their cooperation? Don't the cells of the muscles, the nervous system, the glands, the blood, and so forth, cooperate rather than struggle? And isn't the life and health of the whole organism due to this cooperation? Duh! Bees and flowering plants cooperate. Air, light, and plants cooperate in photosynthesis. So why do we miss this cooperation? And you could, pardon me, extend this comparison into the economic sphere with communitarianism and distributism. You know, are those not social initiatives based on cooperation? Unlike socialism, which is based on forced cooperation. But though distributism and communitarianism are voluntaristic, right? They're participatory and not at gunpoint. So here we are. He's pointing out here, and again, he draws our attention to these disparities which need synthesis, or at least one side of them needs to be acknowledged enough to be able to even come to a synthesis, where our society and our culture tends to be one-sided. And then he continues, and he does notice he brought in astrology with the discussion of Gemini, versus Sagittarius. Is it Gemini, the cooperative constellation, or is it Sagittarius, the hunter, right? Who seeks to dominate. But nevertheless, he goes on and talks about in the cooperation that Gemini represents, and he sees Gemini as a traditional attribute of the card, the sun. He says, now the knowledge of things themselves entails two functions. On the one hand, what Henri Bergson happily designates as sympathy, and on the other hand, to sustain a profound deepening in that with which the sympathetic relationship is established. In other words, one has to enter into a contact of essential sympathy, that is, from essence to essence, first of all, and then not to glide off to other contacts of the kind, but to dwell in this sympathy, so as to result in sufficient intensity and clarity in order to be able to say, in all honesty, that in fact an act of material knowledge has taken place. Well, this, again, is what phenomenology is. So this is phenomenology pure and simple. It's the dwelling in that sympathy or in that participation with phenomena. And he gives an example which I think is a very good example. Right after this. You venerate, that is, you love and respect, a non-incarnated being, a departed person, a saint, or a hierarchical being, in a disinterested manner. Your veneration, which includes love, respect, gratitude, the desire to conform, and so forth, cannot fail to create an invisible link of sympathy with its object. Okay, that cannot fail to create an invisible link of sympathy with its object. It may be in a subtle and dramatic way, or rather in a slow, gradual, and almost imperceptible way. This does not matter. The day will come when you will experience the presence. Not a fluidic, semi-electrical presence close to you in space, as in the apparition of a phantom or ghost, but a breath of radiant serenity, of which you know with certain knowledge that the source from which it emanates is not at all in you. It influences you and fills you, but it does not take its origin in you. It comes from outside of you. Now, so many things we can say about this, and I think I shared with one of my experiences with venerating this icon that was weeping oil at an Orthodox church in Michigan some 20 years ago. But even more, I think this is something that we do. I mean, when we say venerate an icon or have a special relationship to a saint. I talked about my particular devotion to St. John the Baptist, but there are other saints. I mean, Edith Stein, Valentin Domberg, even John Donne, Henry Vaughan, Vladimir Soloviev, most of them aren't canonized saints. But for me, I have dwelt so much in contemplation of them and of their work that, over time, you feel their presence. Maybe not all the time, but you come into their presence and they come into yours. It's unmistakable. It's absolutely unmistakable. This is what happens. There's an Orthodox priest who's also a phenomenological philosopher. His name's John Panteleimon Manosakis. And Father Manosakis wrote in an essay, and I can't remember the title of the essay, unfortunately. But he talks about praying before an icon and sometimes the unsettling experience with praying before an icon where you feel that you're being seen from the other side. Now, he calls that inverse intentionality, which I think he gets from Edmund Husserl, but I call it double intentionality because it's your own intentionality to the image or the notion or the idea of the saint, meeting the intentionality on the other side of the icon. And I'm not making this up. This is what happens. And it's important. And apparently, Valentin Tomberg had the same experience, as he talks in this letter in particular. But you can get it all the way through that he's had these experiences. And he continues on the next page, 530. The meeting is thus the realization of the relationship when it is born to the limit of the intensity of clarity. According to the case, it can take either the character of a conversation through forces or that of a conversation through words. In the former case, it is not precise and articulated thoughts or images which are communicated to you, but rather forces or impulses, spiritual and psychic seeds impregnated germinally with moral ideas and judgments. In the case of conversation through words, a revelation of articulated thoughts and representations takes place. Right? And it gives the examples of the shepherds at the Nativity. They had the conversation through words. The angel told them, go and seek the child. Right? Whereas the Magi, they had an experience, their conversation was through forces, through the star, through intuition. And he points to that as more of the Hermetic path, though it's not exclusive. You would say that, right? Right? And this is intuition, understood as the alliance of active wisdom and active intelligence, which is the theme of the 19th arcana of the tarot, and which not only underlies Hermeticism, but is its very reason for existence, because it presupposes the cooperation of two principles, and therefore falls in the category of the revelation whose character is conversation through forces. Right? And you can't fail to have this experience. It takes, like he said, it takes over time. But it's an unshakable conviction you come to. You just, it's if you're as unshakable as knowing you're standing on the ground, right? Or you're looking at the sun. I mean, that's how unshakable. And this leads him into a discussion of the Christian year, because he starts with the Nativity. And here's what he says, just to share, 532. The annual repetition of the Nativity of Christ is a real event on the spiritual plane, like those of his miracles, his passion, his resurrection, and ascension. It means to say that just as the external sun eternally repeats springtime, summer, autumn, and winter, so does the spiritual sun reveal his eternal springtime aspect, his infancy at Christmas, his eternal summer aspect, his miracles, his eternal autumnal aspect, his passion and resurrection, and his eternal winter aspect, the ascension. This means to say that the ages are eternal, that infancy, youth, middle age, and old age are eternal. Christ is eternally child, master, crucified, and resurrected. Man bears in himself at one and the same time the child, the young man, the mature man, and the old man. Right? As Wordsworth writes in the ode, the child is father of the man. It's always present. Right? And Tomberg connects this. This is the same with epochs. This is the same with psychology. Everything is always present, right? Because time is a linear procession. Is only way to look at time, and we're not looking at it from the kairotic perspective all the time. And the kairotic is only that which comes through contemplation. And where we are, we can only come for moments. We can't permanently reside there, which would probably not be healthy while living on the earth, until we too are clothed in our resurrection bodies. And it says some interesting things about this, and I'm going to keep going. So let's think about the Christian year then, and how this repeats year after year, how we dwell within it. And he says on page 533, all the festivals of the year aim at resurrection. The whole liturgical year says to us, do not forget. Remember, for it is through memory that resurrection is accomplished. And this was my bias. This is what happens if we become disconnected from the Christian year, which is also to be disconnected from the agricultural year. We forget, right? It really builds through the etheric repetition of the year. You know, you think about Easter, which falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. I mean, that extraordinary rhythm that comes with that, and it speaks to an etheric rhythm with the moon, you know, and how this rhythm of the church year with the fixed feasts and the movable feasts, you know, which is nice, because if they were all fixed, it would be a different experience. And I think recently some churchmen were suggesting that we have Easter as a fixed feast. No way, never. Over my dead body. Now, and this is it. I mean, what I was saying is that we forget then. It's that etheric play that's in the cycle of the year, which allows it to be alive still. You know, it's not fixed, like a fixed idea. Similarly with the agricultural year, that in many ways reflects the church year. That and by being disconnected from that, we are further disconnected from the spiritual, which informs the agricultural year, the seasons. And that's spiritually, degraded. And how to capture that, especially in a highly technicized culture, it's going to take some. It offers us some challenges, brothers and sisters. And connected to this kind of idea of resurrection, he talks about, this is also in 533, I should probably read it, the different renaissances that happen, right? How the Renaissance, the Florentine Renaissance, brought back Greco-Roman philosophy and the arts in a way. I mean, it didn't bring them back. It brought them back in new bodies, in a sense. And then he talks about the Renaissances, which will reestablish psychic continuity and will signify the second degree of resurrection, that of the life of the soul. Right? This will be followed by the resurrection of the body, which will be its completion. Right? So what is this, the resurrection of the soul? What could that be? And I think he gets to it later in the letter. We'll get there. Hold on. Stay with me. And then he continues here. Now, notice also he gets into a discussion of the value of scholasticism before he really gets to his main point. This is around 538, 539. And because he knows that people dismiss scholasticism as an over-intellectualized endeavor. You know, I certainly have the tendency to dismiss it like that. The Eastern Orthodox don't get scholasticism at all. They thought it was pirating Greek philosophy into the church, but of course they have Neoplatonism to deal with. But he says on page 538, it is not true that scholasticism is due to the desire to intellectualize faith and to replace it by philosophy. No, what is at the root of scholasticism is the desire for the fullness of intuition. That is, that of baptizing intelligence and winning its cooperation with faith, which is one of his themes here. And he said in the last letter, you can't get stuck at intellectualism. It has to go someplace. Now, there certainly are aspects of a scholastic philosophy that got stuck in, hair splitting and in a love affair with the syllogism. But it's not. But he says it's not necessarily the case with Thomas Aquinas, who comes to the realization that all of his work is straw. His thinking led him to mysticism. And if you read, say, Bonaventure, it's certainly not the case there. Not the case with, St. Francis of Assisi was not really a scholastic, but he grew up in that time. And there are many other examples. Meister Eckhart is another one. Royce Brock is one. And then he even points out that leading up to John of the Cross, you can't really imagine him without scholasticism. And he's not a scholastic. Now, the problem, I would suggest, what happens here is that what gets caught up in this the rejection of scholasticism is a product of the rejection of neo-scholasticism, also called the manualist tradition. And this, I think, has done serious damage to the Catholic Church, which started in the late Renaissance, the early modern period, with the kind of we call manualism, where everything is reduced to a catechetical instruction guide. And mysticism no longer has a part of it. And this was actually my experience going through theological training in high school and elementary school, is that the emphasis was on catechetics and not on the experience of God. And so you get this kind of dry intellectual experience of what God is. In fact, my former pastor used to make fun of the Baltimore Catechism, because when he was a principal in the school, he went into a second grade classroom and he asked the kids, well, who is God? And this little boy raised his hand. I know. Okay. God is a string being who created the universe. Well, that's he got the God is the supreme being who created the universe, but he got the string being. And that's the point that my pastor was trying to make. It's that definitions don't tell you who God is. And if you ever see this television series, The Decalogue by Krzysztof Kieslowski, there's a lovely point in the first episode where this aunt, who's a Catholic, is talking to her nephew, whose father is an atheist. And he wants to know who God is. Well, who is God? He says. And she gives him a hug, and she's caressing him. And she says, what do you feel now? And he says, I love you. She says, yeah, that's where God is. And that should be the catechetical approach, not the memorization of definitions. And that's what happened with neo-scholasticism. It reduced faith to a series of definitions, which tried to talk about horrible pedagogy, to bring that to children. Dreadful. And in fact, as a corrective to this, in the 1940s, Henri de Lubac wrote the book Surnaturel, which still has yet to be translated into English, which was highly criticized by the neo-scholastics of his time, and for a time, he was forbidden to teach because of it, or to publish. But that was his point, is that all these guys got St. Thomas wrong, because St. Thomas wrote that there's a natural desire planted in the heart of man to see God, right? And this got into the debate about pure nature, natura pura, which decided that if God wanted to, he could remove his grace from any place or any human being. This is total Calvinism. And it's wrong. But anyway, I don't want to digress too far into that place, because we have a lot to do today. So that's the problem. So and Tomberg does not mention neo-scholasticism, but I think that's important to know that it was neo-scholasticism that made scholasticism look bad. And in fact, Thomas Vaughan, in his introduction to the Fama and the Confessio of the Rosicrucian documents, he writes, "The schoolmen have got the day, not by weight but by number." And he had a real problem with neo-scholasticism. Because he too, being a Hermeticist, wanted the media experience. He had an intellect, but it had to be married to experience. It couldn't just be a theoretical experience of God. It had to be the real thing. But this leads, from this, Tomberg leads into the heart of his letter on the sun, when he talks about Sophia, right? The invisible cement of intuition, Hermeticism is indeed, without the invisible cement of intuition, Hermeticism is indeed only an improvised assemblage of heterogeneous elements of science and religion, right? And then he moves into Sophia right there. And he points to the Zohar, which talks, says there in the Zohar on this page 540. The great light, the sun, has the name Yehovah, and the lesser light, the moon, has the name Elohim, which is the last of the degrees and the close of thought. Originally, here's the key, she was inscribed above the letters of the sacred name Yehovah, which are 4 in number. It was only after diminishing herself that she took the name Elohim, but her power is manifest in all directions. And then, right after this, he points to, we talked to, was it last time? The time before? Apuleius in his book, The Golden Ass, right? And his vision, and Lucius's vision of Sophia Isis, or Isis Sophia, right? And then he points, and and he's talking about, throughout this letter, intuition married to intellect. And here's what he says on page 541. Now the moon, insofar as she is the nocturnal luminary here below, reflects the sun, but insofar as she is the nocturnal luminary above, she shines with her own light, and it is the sun which reflects her. In other words, the moon is solar above and lunar here below, whilst the sun is solar here below and lunar above. That's some esoteric thought right there. It is in this sense that El, the radiant part of the moon's name above, has the dominion of the day. That is, it is the visible sun, reflecting the invisible moon during the day. Similarly, the visible moon reflects the sun, become invisible during the night. The spiritual moon is therefore the sun which shines at midnight. It is the spiritual moon, or Isis Sophia, that Apuleius saw shining at midnight in its brilliant radiance. For the long vigil in the Isis temple resulted in a vision of the cosmic principle of Isis, that is, the spiritual moon, or the sun at midnight. He continues, all these things, although presented to us in mythological clothing, relate to the profound reality of the relationship of intelligence and wisdom in their union, intuition. For intelligence corresponds to the moon, wisdom to the sun, and intuition to the restoration of the intimate union of the two luminaries. Here below, intelligence reflects wisdom. Or if it is eclipsed, as in letter 18, it reflects the terrestrial world of external experience. But there is another intelligence above, a transcendental intelligence, whose light is greater than that which radiates here below, and which is inscribed above among the letters of the sacred name. This higher intelligence, the sun at midnight, which is the conjunction of the spiritual sun and the spiritual moon, is the star of Hermeticism and is the sun of the 19th Arcanum. Right? And he points out, now, if you see the crown of Isis, it's a sun united to a moon. Right? And as he, a little bit later, I may have just skipped it. A little bit later, he points out how this is exactly what happens in the Revelation with the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and crowned with 12 stars. Boom! It's all right there. And then this is what he says on page 542. He says, therefore, it is not thanks to the suppression of intelligence or becoming less intelligent that intuition is attained, but rather, on the contrary, it is thanks to its intensification until it becomes creative and it is thus united to its higher transcendental aspect, after which it is united to wisdom. And he means united to wisdom in more than one way. It means united to wisdom as, being wise, but also united to Sophia, who is wisdom. And this is where he's going. And this is what I call in my book, The Submerged Reality, a poetic metaphysics. And like I said before, I don't mean poetic by not really that true, but kind of true. I mean, it's truth, but this is a different way of conceptualizing. You've gone beyond rationality, but you're still using the intelligence, if that makes sense. And this is what he says at the bottom, connects this back to his discussion of scholasticism. Just as the impulse of scholasticism did not lead to a perfect system of scholastic philosophy, but rather to mysticism, so does individual intelligence on the ladder of an individual development lead to intuition and not to a state where it knows all and explains all. Right? And this is extraordinary. Right? We tend to equate intelligence with knowing a lot of stuff, which is, I guess, kind of a materialistic way of going about things. But what he's doing is connecting intelligence at this point to wisdom and intuition, which is more important. And he points to Immanuel Kant, whose work, he says in his words, scorched the pretensions to certainty of autonomous intelligence with respect to metaphysical things by demonstrating set limits of knowledge possible to autonomous intelligence. And this is why I wish Tomberg could have encountered Jacques Derrida, because if Kant scorched the pretensions to certainty, Derrida obliterated them. And in a good way. I mean, like I said before, Derrida's work leads to a kind of, one of his favorite terms, religion without religion, and also to a kind of apophatic mysticism. I mean, really his last works are apophatic theology, pure and simple, negative theology, pure and simple. Important to read them. But then let's move along into his discussion of Sophia, which begins around page 546 more heavily, right? And he connects it to the one with the 12 stars. On page 547, he says, "It is she, the Virgin of Light of the Pistis Sophia, the wisdom sung of by Solomon, the Shekinah of the Kabbalah, the Mother, the Virgin, the pure celestial Mary, who is the soul of the light of the three luminaries, and who is both the source and aim of Hermeticism." Wow. For Hermeticism is, as a whole, the aspiration to participation in knowledge of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and the Mother, Daughter, and Holy Soul. It is not a matter of seeing the Holy Trinity with human eyes, but rather of seeing with the eyes and in the light of Mary Sophia. For just as no one comes to the Father but by Jesus Christ, so does no one understand the Holy Trinity but by Mary Sophia. And just as the Holy Trinity manifests itself through Jesus Christ, so understanding of this manifestation is possible only through intuitive apprehension of what the Virgin Mother of Jesus Christ understands of it, who not only bore him and brought him to the light of day, but who is also present as his mother, at his death on the cross. And just as wisdom, Sophia, as Solomon said, was present at the creation, he's talking about Proverbs 8, and built her house, Proverbs 9, So Mary Sophia was present at the redemption and was at work beside him and built her house, set up her 7 pillars. That is, she became Our Lady of the 7 Sorrows. For the 7 sorrows of Mary correspond for the work of redemption to the 7 pillars of Sophia for the work of creation. Wow. Sophia is the queen of the 3 luminaries, the moon, the sun, and the stars, as the great portent of the Apocalypse shows. Just as the Word of the Holy Trinity became flesh in Jesus Christ, so did the light of the Holy Trinity become flesh in Mary Sophia. The light, that is, the threefold receptivity, the threefold faculty of intelligent reaction, or understanding. Mary's words, "Let it be to me according to your word," are the key to the mystery of the relationship between the pure act and pure reaction, between the word and understanding. Lastly, between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit on the one hand, and Mother, Daughter, and Holy Soul on the other hand. They are the true key to the seal of Solomon, the hexagram. All right, Lord, let's hold on a second. Brother just dropped something on us with the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Soul, which he calls the luminous Holy Trinity, joined to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Well, this is big. This is tremendously big right here, don't you think? And he, of course, he gives the hexagram. You probably have it in your book, so I won't show you. Oh, whoa. Well, I mean, what do we do with this information? I think all we can do with this information is contemplate it, is dwell with it, and even more to take it into our prayer life. I mean, I don't know, a while ago, I don't know how long ago, months, years, a year, I started incorporating the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Soul in my invocation at the beginning of praying the Rosary. And actually, when I pray at night before I go to sleep, and just about whenever I pray, just to see what happens. And though I can't, probably reluctant to talk about it because I think I don't have a deep enough experience of it yet. And I don't mean it hasn't been a profound experience. I mean, I'm still figuring it out. But it's certainly worth doing. I recommend it to you. Because, as he says on page 548, then is the hexagram representing the 2 triangles, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Mother, Daughter, Holy Soul. And these 2 triangles of the luminous Holy Trinity are revealed in the work of redemption, accomplished through Jesus Christ and conceived through Mary Sophia. Jesus Christ is its agent. Mary Sophia is its luminous reaction. That is heavy. Right? Right? And he connects this, I mean, more, and it's not thorough, I don't think, because I think we still need to dwell with it ourselves. But on 549, he gives a little bit more of a description of what he means by the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Soul. And he says, "For just as the Word became flesh in Jesus Christ, so did the Bath Call, the daughter of the voice, become flesh in Mary Sophia. The Church worships her as the Virgin, as the Mother, and as the Celestial Queen, corresponding to the Mother, the Daughter, and the Virgin of Israel of the Kabbalah, and to the Sophianic Trinity, Mother, Daughter, and Holy Soul, mentioned above." That's big. And this is the one, it's hard to know who you can share this information with, because you don't want to, have people start throwing holy water on you or report you to the bishop or something. But I think it's important to think about, and this is what Hermeticism does. This reaching into, and I not only that, but I think with this in particular, I think this is the kind of intuition of a child. And I don't mean a childish intuition. I mean, this is the kind of question a kid would ask. If you just said, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, say it with us, Jimmy. Why don't we say, isn't there a mom, when they say something like that? And there is. And then after this, Tomberg drops another hint of biography on page 549. Because right after he compares the Mother, Daughter, and the Holy Soul to the Trinity of Eleusis, Demeter, Persephone, and Athena, he says, historical analogies and metaphysical parallels alone, however, do not suffice to attain the complete certainty of intuition. It is for the heart to say the last decisive word. Thus, the following argument of the heart proved to be decisive 25 years ago to the one who writes these lines. And 25 years before he wrote this, I'm assuming it's 65, 66, would be the early 40s. So it's after Tomberg was kicked out of the Anthroposophical Society, and not quite when he entered the church. I think he entered the church in 44, 45. So, but I'm sure that had everything to do with him joining the church. And this is his discussion of parental love. Again, he returns in a different permutation here to gendered typology. Right? And he says, for it is the experience of parental love, and is above all this, which renders us capable of loving the architect or first cause of the world as our Father who is in heaven. Right? We don't love principles. We love Father. Remember I told you about Edith Stein, thinking about when you think about God, it's like being in your Father's arms, and you know He's not going to drop you. And then Tomberg kind of pulls out all the stops on 550 when he says, one should honor the Father who is in heaven and the celestial mother. This is why practicing believers of the traditional church, that is the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, caring little for the difference stated in dogmatic theology between the celestial Father and Mother, love and honor in their practice of prayer the celestial Mother no less than the Father who is in heaven. Dogmatic theologians may well put believers on their guard against exaggeration in the domain of Mariology, and Protestant critics may well advance criticism of the cult of the Virgin Mary as idolatry, but practicing believers of the traditional church continue and will always continue to honor and love their celestial mother as the eternal mother of all that lives and breathes. And I think practice shows this. Look at the devotion to the Rosary, to the Virgin Mary in the Catholic Church and in the Orthodox Church. And he quotes the hymn to the Virgin. It's from the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. More honored than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim, thou who art the true mother of God, we honor, we magnify in our translation, my church it says. Right? The role accorded to the Virgin Mary does not stop growing. Now, it's true because the Marian dogmas is changed over time, and the dogma of the Assumption of Mary wasn't promulgated until the 50s, which actually made Carl Jung really a happy man. He wrote quite extensively about what a great moment for human psychology this was when Mary's assumption into heaven was promulgated. But as Tomberg points out on 551, for it is thus that all church dogmas have arrived in the past at their promulgation. They live first of all in the hearts of the believers, then influence more and more the liturgical life of the church, in order, lastly, to be promulgated as formulated dogmas. I think this is true. And I tell people, considering the struggles, especially the traditional church has been going through in recent years, I say, you know what? Don't worry about that stuff, because that's clericalism, or, it's not something we can, it's not something we can influence directly, I don't think. But we can, as laity, do this. You live it, and eventually the bishops will promulgate it and take credit, but we'll live it. So don't worry about that. Just and then he goes even further. Boy, it's pretty incredible. And he talks about, don't worry about it. The church takes a long time to make decisions. Just do your business. Get about your father's business, or your mother's business in this case. He says, be that as it may, whatever the duration of time for the mysterious process of the birth of the dogma raising maternal love to the level of the Holy Trinity may be, it is already well formulated and is at work across the centuries. Right? It is a matter of meditating on the mystery of the luminous Holy Trinity, whose symbol is the seal of Solomon, or again on the symbol of the Trinity alongside of the luminous Holy Trinity. Right? And this is, and then he talks. What's a good example of this? The novena, right? Very simple prayer schedule that millions upon millions of people pray on a regular basis, and then of course he goes back to the Rosary. Now, if this chapter doesn't get you to even start to experiment with the Rosary, if you haven't done it so far, then maybe you should rethink your resistance. Because he says right here, similarly it is so with the Rosary prayer, where appeal to the two aspects of divine paternal love and the prayer addressed to the Father and the Mother is made during meditation on the mysteries of joy, suffering, and glory of the Blessed Virgin. And I would add that in the 1980s, and I think it was really prescient and beautiful, St. John Paul II added the luminous mysteries, which the luminous mysteries, if you don't know, are the baptism of Jesus, the marriage at Cana, the preaching of the gospel and the feeding of 5,000, the transfiguration, and the institution of the Eucharist and the priesthood. You almost get chills just thinking about it. So it's important, and usually people pray those on Thursdays, in case you didn't know. And he says here, as he's finishing up, the Rosary prayer is, in any case for the Hermeticist, again a masterpiece of simplicity, containing and revealing things of inexhaustible profundity, a masterpiece of the Holy Spirit. Right? And so, there's a lot to think about after this letter, and I enjoy you to think of it, and to really take this idea of the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Soul into your prayer and meditative lives, because I think that's where you discover reality, and through prayer, through meditation and contemplation. And I'm just kind of bowled over by this letter. I've read it. I don't know how many times I've read this. I probably read this one more than the others, because as I was working on my books on sophiology, I revisited this one even more than the others in this book. Even though I looked at them, but this one I read over and over, and I excerpted it in The Heavenly Country. So consider this, and when you say those words, Ave Maria, gratia plena, right? The words of the angel, they mean a lot more. So I'll see you next time.